Because here's the one thing I can't, I'm just going to bring this in right now. Hasn't even been mentioned so far. This is where I actually want to just exit all discussion with everyone American in esports. That 1 second after it was announced that 2 teams, literally fucking 20% of the league has just disappeared overnight, 1 day before all the players are supposed to sign. And everyone's take was, in a way, I think this is a good thing though. Fuck you. Actually, fuck you. Because the other way around, if you do things like expand a league and add teams and bring money in, you go, this is a proof that esports works. Well, then logically, the opposite happening proves it doesn't. You can't take that as a W. And all the people like, yeah, but in some ways, like the league already, like this will just consolidate talent, right? That by the way, don't ever mention that to me because that doesn't work. We already know from all other closed circuit systems that you don't actually consolidate all the top talent. What happens is talent gets locked out the league. So as we'll see now in LEC and LCS, a bunch of the best players who could be the MVP won't even play this split. So these things don't work, mate. Like it actually does low key irritate me because you're saying it like it's some frivolous thing. Like, well, again, like, well, who could have known that they'd all fail? I've been saying it to people for 20 years. So go watch my track record, mate.
So I will say what's so funny about what you mentioned, Thorin, about people saying it's a good thing is that take isn't wrong. In the context of what is happening right now, this is actually a good thing. But hilariously, obviously, you have to at that point say, how did we get to this point where this is a good thing? Like having fewer teams, having to split that revenue in a league that is declining in viewership like the LCS is, the viewership continues to drop. Split over split. LCS didn't even do well compared to other leagues during COVID when everyone was a prisoner in their own home. And we saw esports viewership go up. It actually maintained pretty constant to pre-COVID, and then it started dropping like a rock when the kind of lockdowns ended. So, I mean, this is a league that has had extreme issues. Over-reliance on billion-dollar external entities like Golden State Warriors or venture capital markets, right? And now nobody can get venture capital any longer because of what the Fed is doing with interest rates because the VC funds themselves are not funded. And now, obviously, esports is a dirty word in VC on top of that. So good luck getting more investment because they've seen that these things aren't going to 100x or whatever in value over the next 5 years. That's actually impossible because now we know all of the things about revenue production that we didn't know previously. So this is an issue that is really profound, but nobody says, holy shit, like, yeah, it's fine that we cut to 8 teams. There were too many teams. There's not enough talent to make it competitive. 8 teams is a better format. It gives you better format options just straight up than 10. 10 teams is a very awkward number for formats.
No one ever said that fucking 1 second before, though. Surely, logically, by what you're saying, the number one suggestion of everyone, including you, Monty, should be why not reduce the league by 2 teams? Here's all the reasons. It'd be brilliant. Sure. Not a single one of you ever said that for 1 second before this happened. Yeah, that's why I say it. You literally woke up and your brain just said, I must find a way. This is positive.
I agree.
And just made it positive, mate.
No,
everything you listed there, I could spin it as a negative. So the viewership will be consolidated. The viewership will go down. There'll be less matches. It's why, by the way, to bring it back to what Richard said, here's why Riot are fucking morons. Because they'll simultaneously brag, we just had the most watched match of all time. I thought about doing low bracket. Why would I do that and have more matches and get more viewership? You can't be helped. As I said earlier, something like that cannot be helped fundamentally. Like at the end of the day, Monty, here's the thing. It's one thing for them not to know what's going on. In this scenario, for a Riot exec to actually do the right thing, it's like the fucking end of Bird Box or something. You have to actually physically take them, put their mouth to the water, punch one, use like a sucking technique to bring the liquid in. That's it. Don't spit it out. Process it. And then finally, when they do, I can't do that, mate. They have to want to drink the water at the end of the day. They have to be involved in the process, mate. Come on.
Well, no, I totally agree with you. That's what I'm saying is like, it's not wrong to say that this is a good decision now, but the lack of criticism for literally every other decision that has led us to this point in time, because there's no way to look at it in the long run except for the fact that this is disastrous for the LCS. Here's why it's disastrous. Let's say in a theoretical universe, as we said, we're supposing, this is speculation, that these slots got bought back by Riot for $5 or $6 million, right? And we know that EG paid $33 million for their slot because they didn't buy it at the same time Golden Guardians did, and Golden Guardians bought it for $12 million, right? And so they have lost an extreme amount of money in this process, because it's not only all the money they paid, it's all the money they paid in operations, right? Paid for the slot, that is. It's all the money they paid in operations for player contracts, to do all of the rebranding exercises. And now this is causing the entire EG to collapse, and they're shuttering all of their esports divisions. This has been an investment for evil geniuses in Peak Six, their parent company, that has, no joke, like conservatively probably lost $50 million. Conservatively.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so there isn't a way to look at this scenario favorably. It's like I said, the cratering viewership of the LCS, the loss of sponsors in the LCS, the lack of enthusiasm for the LCS. I mean, this is a product that is in critical danger. You can't get a consistent commissioner for this league because the job is a fucking poison chalice. It is a poison chalice. There isn't fixing the problem. And as LCS commissioner, you don't have any power. It's not like you're the top dog. You report to 12 different, there's like 12 levels of people above you, and you can't even have autonomy. And if you are LCS commissioner, you actually just can't. Other people will prevent you from making good decisions, because a lot of the people who made the bad decisions about LCS are now your bosses at Riot. And if you reverse those decisions and see success, guess who looks bad? It's the people who are your bosses who made those original decisions. And because Riot never fires anybody for reasons that I cannot possibly comprehend, those people are just entrenched there until the end of time. So there's very few ways to actually remedy this problem right now. And the death spiral, I don't think, can be stopped for LCS. Like, it's basically just doomed to be a smaller and smaller viewership league over time.
Well, I can give you actually. Go ahead, Richard.
No. It's good, brother. You go first. You're the guest for sure.
Well, mine's going to be a pretty big aside to all of this, in that I actually think there always can be optimism. I don't think anything is ever actually dead. I think we've seen this kind of uniformly across video games. I think the challenge actually at the core of all of this is that the viewership is not actually tethered to the quality of the broadcast. I think we've seen strides made with the broadcast, actually, even recently.
True.
That would, in theory, say that we should see it go up. Let's ignore the day of the week change and all that stuff. Inside the actual broadcast, the quality going up inside of all of its own stuff, it still doesn't do anything to the actual challenge, which is making your game popular, actually having the game of League of Legends be big and relevant in the space where it needs to be to help accelerate and grow the league further. I think what we've probably seen more than anything, we can throw out everything with respect to the teams, and we can throw out almost everything with respect to the LCS and say, okay, let's pretend they all did it correctly. I actually don't even know if that would be enough to tackle the significant paradigm shift we've seen in gaming, where there's 1,000 games, 1,000 high quality games coming out every day, all of the time, on like 16 different platforms to digest it. And I don't know how, like, they just haven't done a great job of continuing to platform League of Legends itself and like push it up, right? Like, Summoner's Rift is like falling secondary to ARAM. Like, inevitably over time we're going to see this, and that's
in America. Like, it's not true in Korea or China. I can tell you that.
Yes, of course. Yeah, of course. And that's what I'm saying. If we're talking about, like, punching down on the LCS as we are, I spend very little time. You're not wrong. Every criticism you guys have leveraged today has been pretty well accurate. I think in the grand scheme of everything, though, it's secondary to whether Riot can actually revitalize League of Legends, the game in North America, to the point where it actually has an impact, because that's what really drives everything across everything. World of Warcraft is like 1 million years old and has like a fraction of the player base it used to have, and has hundreds of thousands of viewers right now watching Race to World First, right? Like, there's obviously, if you get people energized about the game, they'll come back and they'll watch, and we see that especially when we look at international events for League of Legends. But regionally, that has just been an abject failure, especially, and it's even more awkward because obviously Riot's based out of North America.
Well, I think there is this kind of sea change happening in esports, from my kind of vantage point, where I think a lot of people are embracing this idea that less is more. That the concept of having like lots of games and just this never-ending deluge of things, it's not going to work in the attention economy, particularly in America, where, as you said, there's like 1 million things to be interested in. So, why would I play this game that's now, what is it, like 15 years old, League, right? It's getting there.
14.
Almost,
So, yeah,
Just under.
okay. So, it's like, why would I prioritize that? And then why would I prioritize focusing on this League product that's kind of a bit of a meme, around the world? And if I want to watch better games, I have to go to a time zone that's not conducive to me. Yeah, I'll sort of give it a miss.
Yeah, they're
And,
killing
I
the
look-
LPL English broadcast, I think, right? That's what they
Yep.
said.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Which is another,
Well, Riot isn't, to be clear. I think actually Riot will probably step in and save it in the long run, but in the
Yeah.
short term, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, so you've got all of these little things going on. Meanwhile, I kind of look over at what's happened with Dota, where Valve have just sort of, I don't want to say admitted defeat, but they've been like, you know what, we tried this Dota Pro circuit, it didn't work out. Nobody seems satisfied with it. We're killing it. We've got TI, but we're gonna work with tournament operators to, come up with cool individual one-off tournaments, like we used to do in kind of what, again, a lot of people consider the golden era of Dota, where every week, it was oversaturated, but every weekend you could turn on Twitch and there was a funny little broadcast that was totally different to all the others. And I think that's where esports is headed as I see it. I think I think we just jumped the gun a bit too much with trying to create an NFL or an NBA within esports. I think structurally that's a nightmare. I think there's a reason kids don't follow stick and ball sports. Fucking think about baseball. Do I want to watch fucking that many games a season? Spoiler, I fucking don't. Not only I don't, I fucking can't. I'm living my motherfucking life. What are you talking about? So, I think what we're seeing now is the idea of esports as a spectacle is where it's at. And this is why I think if Riot Games do want to save their product, and I'll assume they do, although Duncan's right, you could literally give them a roadmap on how to do it, and they would set it on fire because you gave it to them. That's just all games developers. The hubris is staggering.
I mean, they just have disdain for people who know esports. Like, they would literally rather hire dumbasses from outside the industry than listen to people who have been here for 20 years.
Richard is right. He's actually making a very relevant point I should have made myself, which is this isn't just a Riot Games problem. In fact, I'll even give Riot Games props in this regard. As much as I might think John Needham's full of shit, there is no guy like that from Valve coming out and making statements about what they're trying to do and what they're... There's nothing. It's complete radio silence, and literally, unironically, it's patch notes, or I have to go and read. It's not a joke, a PC gamer interview, like a very general, just gaming interview with Valve. Like, to be fair, I actually think Riot, this is the one thing I always do give them props for, at least in attempting to communicate, they do way more than the others. Even the same, by the way, with their patch notes, they actually try to tell you if it's a buff or a nerf. Like, I actually will give them props for that. At least they're doing more than the others.
Like, imagine a world where, I mean, they're all Saudi owned now, so it's not good, but imagine it wasn't. Imagine we were a functional, healthy industry. Like, just try.
It's the way your Twilight episode in like 5 years is just like, imagine a world where esports wasn't owned by the Middle Eastern oligarchs. Imagine real American businesses invest, like, and everyone be like, well, it's too far out for me. It's too crazy. This one is mind bender.
You and your wacky ideas. So anyway, but so imagine a world where Riot sort of said, you know what, we're gonna kill the league. We're not gonna have leagues, and what we're gonna do is we're gonna have like the IPLs, and ESL are gonna run them, and we'll come up with a fucking ranking system, a power ranking system. Top teams get invited. We have a wildcard qualifier, and you get one of them every 3 months, a big one, right? And suddenly, by creating scarcity, you create value. It's like we really fucked up in this business, like collectively, where we tied ourselves to a bunch of metrics that were not about quality, not about spectacle, but were about quantity. And it was about serving up bland slop, minutes viewed, hours watched, blah, 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 and unfortunately, I think you do that on a long enough timetable, people get bored and they tune out and they're not as excited for the next time. It's exactly what happened with StarCraft 2. Oversaturation was a real issue, and then by the time WCS tried to sort of sift through it all, Activision Blizzard fucked it up because they're idiots too. So I mean, look, I hope Riot are open to the idea, because I think everyone in League would really welcome that. You have like a fucking ranking system, a couple of tournaments, and then that serve as regional qualifiers for a big IPL. Boom, bada bing, a wild card team gets in there. and you get to see all the teams from all over the world with their different styles and metas clash, generates success. You'll break viewership records with that. It'll be like having Worlds every 3 months.
By the
I don't
way,
think
I'll
you'll
just
see
say
that.
this. Oh, go on.
I was just gonna say,
Yeah,
I don't
go
think
on.
you'll see that until LCS collapses, and then LEC collapses, and then even then, maybe, but not especially until LCK collapses. Until 3 of the 4 major regions collapse, they're just never going to have, even in the most optimistic outcome where you yourself get slotted in at an incredibly senior level at Riot Games, I don't think there's going to be the appetite. And I think you can just look at Valorant to see and understand how that's the case. The entire offseason was like pseudo unplanned for Valorant, and now has made the great pivot to what I assume is like their actual intention, which is just creator stuff. It's show matches, it's exhibitions. They're just trying to draw as much as they can off the influencers. And I think you'll see that kind of pivot and like them commit to something like that for the better part of 10 years for League of Legends before they would ever even like vaguely consider what you're talking about.
Yeah.
The problem I have with this whole topic as well is this all does come down again to like an American-centric view of the world. Like you said it earlier, Darren. The real problem here is Riot Games themselves are American, so they have to maintain this conceit that like NA/the LCS is a major region. This is like a top esports product. I've always said this to Monty. Do you know how actually jarring it is to come from other esports games where I'm a pure elitist and I only watch the top 10 teams or players in the world, and then come into the LCS where effectively, if you know how many good Koreans aren't even on teams, I'm watching like the 1050th best player is the star of the league. Like to me, that if you actually even just said, and then we're going to make that league like the NFL, I'd go, well, it's a bad product, isn't it though? Like I want to watch the Koreans and the Chinese player. So inherently to me, there's always been like a flaw within even the concept that like the LCS could be the main product. And to me, a lot of it is just the fact that Riot themselves are Americans. So it's the market they understand. It's a market they want to succeed. Half the joke about league is if they look at China, they're killing the game. Look at all the viewership. Look at the size of the league. Look at all the crazy things they're doing there and the integration with the government. And all. In theory, that should be the success story. The problem is though, Riot's only tangentially connected to that because luckily China's the one party that could say to Riot, "Oh, you think you own this game, do you?" Like brilliant. They're basically that guy to fucking
put
when
their
Ben
hand
was
on
with
their
the
shoulder
flags
like
play,
that.
you go,
Yeah.
"Oh, you think you're in control, do you?" That's basically what happens when they rock up to the LPL, isn't it? That's why Reggie hasn't got his team yet. That's all you need to know.
Well, you noticed I listed LPL last, and basically not at all when I was going through the list of things that collapsed because I
They can fail.
assume try to just they can. I just assume they won't let them. They don't have to. They can just not.
I mean, just as another little thing as well, and this is like, I don't know, we're definitely getting outside the lines. Got a couple of points I'll bring us back, but I want to talk about this because you know how everyone wants to be the NFL in esports. They always wanted that. They always wanted to be the NFL, the NBA.
I
That's
wanted to be
basically
an NFL GM. That was like the
right?
plan.
Oh,
I'm from Iowa. We don't even
Americanism.
have a pro sports team here, so I was like, I'm
Right.
gonna be a GM for a pro sports team.
Right. So, it's like the thing about American sports is the way it all works is that you have this pipeline. I'm not talking about EG's pipeline, but they have a pipeline. They do have a talent pipeline through collegiate, but they also have a drafting system that generates content in and of itself, an interest in and of itself. Everyone's excited for it. Everyone's hyped for it. It's televised. And then obviously the worse you do one season, the democratizing factor is you get the higher picks in the draft. So theoretically your talent comes through. Now, there's nothing like that in esports. So when you go to copying an NFL or an NBA model, one of the fundamental problems you've got is we don't have a pipeline of talent. There's no grassroots. There's nothing to come through. There's no drafting system. Even if we had a really good academy players in NA and we thought, hey, let's do a drafting system, legally you can't have a drafting system because you don't have a players association and all this other stuff that you have to have if you're going to run a sport in America. So
We could do it anyways and get fined like Overwatch.
yeah, why not? Right? Exactly.
By the
Very
way,
good
if you're
point. Yeah.
listening, don't ask Jack why there's not a union. He has nothing to do. Ask Doublelift why there's not a union. There's the person you want to ask why there's no
Double
player
grift.
union.
I believe I believe we come on.
After all these years, that's how you know how beloved Doublelift was. No one saw that one, Rich. It was right there the whole time, just dangling.
Double grift. Well, there you go. I live to give. But anyway, the point is, I just think, like, listen, I got my own beef with Americans when it comes to fucking esports and sports and just stuff in general. And, I'm pretty on record as saying I think the worst part of the internet now is that you just sort of exist in some sort of American cultural tyranny where all sensibilities have to be passed through whether some American cunt you've never met might get offended, and it's just really ridiculous for people who aren't American. But the pendulum's going to swing back on that. You'll all find out. But anyway,
Richard's going to go make his own internet with blackjack and hookers.
Here's the thing.
I mean, we are kind of.
Yeah. Blackjack and hookers is fucking perfect. But it's like maybe just the way we've conceptualized these leagues in the first instance by Americans' frame of reference wanting to emulate the successful sports products. That's where we've really gone wrong with it, because in Counter-Strike, which was predominantly European driven at the start, the open circuit has been a boon, and the only thing that's dampened that in recent years is these pseudo franchise leagues, these partnered leagues, and we've seen a reduction in talent, a reduction in competition, young players not getting opportunities, orgs not being able to eat and earn money. And it's had all this negative effect to the point where Valve have gone, we ain't doing that in 2025. So, all of those, we won't give you a license if you charge somebody to be a partner in your league. And, God bless. So I'm just wondering, like, say, if this is the moment Riot takes stock, if you're not going to listen to 50% of your league saying, I would exit now if I could. If the money was there and, it was urgent, I would go. If you're not going to listen to that and make some fundamental changes, then ultimately you sort of do deserve to be doomed. Survival of the fittest.
By the way, remember when they made the franchising for the LCS, two of the main selling points and reasons given as to why it was really important that we have an LCS and any LCS franchised, not an open circuit with relegation and promotion, was one, the idea that but if I buy into an open circuit, I could put loads of money in and lose everything. Hold. So anyway, that happened anyway. It's all great. We lost all the upside of that. Still happened anyway. They're all gone. And then secondly, the other classic one. Are you ready? This is a proper barn burner. They were going to develop NA talent. Last year, Team Liquid made a fucking super team with $7 million, all imports. This year, they tried to make an all Korean-speaking super team. It's a franchise league that's supposed to develop talent. That is mental. Sorry, that's just by the by. That's just how it was all nonsense from the beginning. Here's the bigger question, though. Actually, there's a point we haven't addressed that I've got to bring in here. It's actually very relevant to this episode. I actually thought, even though obviously the bigger scale of teams leaving the league, this might mean other people cash out in the next years or faith in the league. That's obviously the biggest problem. But a more minor one I think was fucked up. I can't believe people let this fly. Was when good old John Needham, or as I call him, John Offer Baloney, came out and made his statements. He absolutely, I'll just say, it wasn't even disingenuous. He was openly dishonest in his statement. His statement contained within it a sentence which I will speculate was intended to make you, the reader, think that it's all okay though, because they did it just in time removing the teams, that all the pro players are going to be fine. And the off-season's just starting now. Free agency was going to start the day after, I think. And so because free agency hasn't officially started, don't worry. Essentially, this isn't musical chairs. The music hasn't stopped and there's still loads of spots. That is exactly the reality opposite of what was going on. If anyone knows how the off-season works, most rosters are already set. Most rosters are literally just waiting to sign the contract the day, I think it's the 21st, the day it opens. There's even teams you will see on the day that the roster announced the players. They didn't do all that in 4 hours, guys. It already was all set. All the teams have allowed people to talk to each other. So that part I did think was actually disgraceful, because that's where Monty, like I say, they have to make it sound like a good thing, because that's obviously a massive L for loads of pro players. Like, spoiler, there were literally players from teams like Golden Guardians and EG essentially just immediately say I guess I'm not playing anymore then.
I mean,
is the real what John Needham implied.
The tragedy that obviously leaps out, and this isn't to be disparaging about any other players, but Licorice just gets, what was it, most improved player of the year award.
He was first team All-Pro in LCS. He was the best player in his position.
They had, because they had two, didn't they? Guardians. Was Huhi the other, or is that right? Or
they had it was Gory. It was Gory almost.
Oh, right, the jungle.
Just by virtue of the position he plays in, and by virtue of the timing of this announcement, Licorice is. I mean, I've asked behind the scenes. Apparently,
didn't he? Yeah.
Yeah, apparently he's gonna have to go play like academy or something for a fucking season.
Yeah, there's a very significant amount of players. A lot of them, my friends, who just have no alternative. There's nothing you do. So things are actually so awkwardly dire for some teams, and this has been kind of the case for the last year and a half, where something as basic as like an unsigned agreement is like something you're basically locked into anyway. Is like the tiny little fraction of a cost it takes to draft a new one, like pay your lawyers to do so, is actually enough to like actually get you some scrutiny internally to the point where you're not comfortable making that pivot. It's actually not as basic as sometimes it is. Sometimes it is they're just lazy and they don't want to change from what they decided. Sometimes it really is actually as crazy as like, but like we already like made the contract and we already started the visa paperwork and like started working with our immigration council, and that's like anywhere from like $2,000 to $10,000, and we don't have like enough flexibility in the budget to walk back that like $2,000 to $10,000 and like do it another direction. Like that tiny little like itty bitty fraction, that layer. And that's why it's so funny to me that I actually think when we look at like the teams that we lost, it's actually even more dire and more depressing than what we were talking about earlier, where, you know, people are saying, oh, it's a good thing. It's like, yeah, in theory, it's a good thing if we picked the right two, like if we got the right two teams out of the league and it was only really two teams that were the problem. Sure, yeah, removing teams can be fantastic. But that's not like what happened here. Golden Guardians had, I'm going to obviously toot my own horn, one of, if not the best staff in the entire LCS. They retained literally everyone, like separate from my departure. They had one of the best rosters that was actually scalable, could be like tweaked and adjusted to be long-term and successful. Kept almost literally everyone a gun at my departure. And same thing with EG. While obviously they had leadership problems, Richard has gone very much in depth on what happened at the top of what happened with EG. Very fundamentally with respect to the talent they'd actually developed and the staff that had found them, very actually great. Probably top 3 in the LCS, top 4 at least with respect to staff. And that's what we wiped out of the league. And because teams are on such thin margins, they can't make pivots to bring those back in. All these players, the staff I just referenced, overwhelmingly none of them have a job. There's like 2 out of probably 16 people that deserve positions not only in the LCS but probably in the top half of the LCS that aren't going to get them because of the timing of this decision.
Not only that, but the org itself was well positioned because you were owned by Golden State Warriors, so you actually can just borrow sales and legal resources from Golden State Warriors. You know, to your point about contracts, it's cheaper for Golden Guardians to retool a contract because they already have lawyers who are part of the team who do this for the fucking NBA.
Constantly.
Yeah. So it's like, because they can share resources, you don't have to hire that person or go to an external vendor. It literally costs $0 additional dollars. And you can constantly, like, the sales team at Golden State Warriors can sell for you, right, with very little additional cost. You can tap into this wealth of personnel and expertise that already exist. And so, in a way, Golden Guardians was capable of operating at much lower amounts of money as a result of this. So it's even shittier in some ways that
while staying successful. That's the important part.
Yes.
Like, being cheap is irrelevant if you're not actually returning value to the league, to the actual franchise partnership that you're in. Golden Guardians was one of the few teams that was like able to not only be cheap but have the actual opportunity. Whether they actually did consistently over their time in the LCS is a separate conversation. I mean, but practically it was there compared to others.
It's a loss to Riot too, because we're even glossing over the fact that literally a year ago, the World Finals was held in the stadium of the Golden State Warriors that is owned by the Golden State Warriors, the Chase Center in San Francisco. This deal was probably a sweetheart deal to Riot and easier to get a very prestigious stadium in the middle of San Francisco because this team was an LCS team. So even Riot is going to be losing out on potential value as a result of this. I can't imagine that they charged market value for that stadium, right? This was probably seen as, you know, a way to...
I can't speak to the charge. But I can tell you there was intention. Like, Chase Center was not this magical, miraculous venue that they just propped up overnight, right? They actually had to, like, go out and raise the money to build this a long time ago with, like, a big intention, big conversation, not only with San Francisco, Oakland, San Jose, the entire state. Like, the plans for building, obviously, the NBA arena are one thing, but very much at the very, very inception of Golden Guardians and Golden State Warriors esports presence was the conversation around the fact that they were going to have that venue and how they were going to get Riot, obviously LCS, but like maybe even more into that venue, not just this one time, but like actually making this like a big standard partnership. That was obviously a conversation that took place. You don't just walk away from that like overnight without there being some awkwardness.
By the way, the other thing as well to shade into this, like earlier on when we had the discussion about Valorant and other games that exist simultaneously that these teams can just choose to go and be a part of. This is why I tried to make the point to people this summer when the walkout was happening. Like, guys, the last people you actually want to piss off and antagonize are the team owners like Cloud9s of the world. Like, they can just leave and go to all the other esports games, man. They don't have to stay in League of Legends. Like, it's not some like inherent thing that must be the case. Like, if there's a better deal for them in 4 or 5 different esports, then they'll go. And eventually that's the angle I guess I'll spin back to you, Dana. It's like, essentially, that's one of the few levers that does exist here is if someone else provides a more appealing model, basically, that could actually spur Riot's hand, right?
Well, that's actually...
They lose like the good teams, you know.
I'll make the opposite point. Usually when the majority of teams are like looking and talking about leaving, that's like obviously a death sentence for a league. I'd actually be just as worried for the few teams that didn't actually want to have that conversation and didn't want to look for their off ramp, because to me it implies that they've actually very significantly tethered themselves to a product that doesn't necessarily look like it has an upside. Look, we can obviously sell it as, well, Cloud9's fine, they'd make the pivot, and I don't doubt that they would survive. But I think they're one of the teams that would actually be most impacted by the LCS failing compared to everyone else. It's actually a point where they need it to work if they want to be where they are and continue to grow from where they are. And I think that would actually be a huge setback for them. So I'd be just as worried for those, I think we've estimated 4 or 5 teams that actually said outright that they're not interested in leaving. I think they're in just as a precarious, if not an even more precarious position, because they don't have a separate fundamental underlying business like an NBA franchise that they're actually just going to go and operate instead.
Right, and that's what causes the fear among the LCS teams, is because you have to remember that a lot of the endemic esports teams raised significant sums of venture capital on the fact that these slots were going to go up in value over time. That was the assumption. Now, objectively, in the best case scenario, as we saw from TSM selling to Shopify Rebellion, the spots are now exactly the same as when this franchise came in 5 years ago, right? 6 years ago.
I think they overpaid, frankly.
They did.
That's certainly a take. Yeah, that's certainly a take. They could be worth 8 million. They could be worth 6 million, right? They've been going down over time. We've seen. So like the peak of it was EG buys Echo Fox for 33 million, right? Then we saw some of these go down to about 20 million by the time like FlyQuest is like, you know, the new ownership group of FlyQuest is coming in around that period. Then we see now 10 million. And then Richard, you were reporting, right, that what was the EG slot supposed to go for in the Luminosity conversation?
So when the
was there a number on that?
Yeah, I think I heard 8 mil at one point, but then that was the stumbling block. And so I don't know I don't have the chronology perfectly mapped up. I know that at one point Enthusiast were the preferred buyer. They were in talks. The talks were pretty advanced. Riot were aware of this. Then I believe Enthusiast pumped the brakes on it. They're obviously hemorrhaging cash as well, just on their various projects in the portfolio. And then, you know, I think probably EG, because of this liquidation process they're essentially going through, where they're just looking to sell everything, including those Valorant players still in fucking contract jail or whatever the fuck. You know, they were like, if there's a buyout offer we can get from you, then we want it, and let's listen. I don't think you're selling an LCS slot. I mean, I'll tell you, the saddest, most pathetic thing I've heard is that all of these teams, I mean, I'm not going to say literally all, but let's just say a lot of these teams in the LCS were sending out like emissaries to try and get with fucking Mr. Beast.
Yeah.
Like desperately begging him to fucking like come in and buy their slot specific. It's like, just fucking stop debasing yourself, guys. Like, if you want to pack up your toys and fuck off, just do it. You know, like, just do it. I mean, it's just like, It's this nonsense of like, I don't like to call out anyone specifically, but like I look at Immortals and just how non-competitive, like you may as well just call your team punchingaClock.com and you're just going through the motions until you can sell your slot. And it's bad for the league. It's bad for everyone else in the league. It devalues the whole fucking product. So, there has to be a point where you just go like, what are we doing? Like,
but whose fault is that? I mean, the fact that Immortals didn't leave in this situation tells you what you need to know, because there is a way right now, based on revenue sharing, for them to just sit there forever and see what's going to happen in the long run.
Yeah, but the way it was framed to me was Riot were essentially saying, if you hold the line now, we'll get you on the comeback. So that's the stage we're at right now. That's the stage of the grieving process we're at now. This is bargaining, motherfucker. That's where we're at.
Well, I think this is all looking at the short term. I think the long term play, like let's just assume the Valorant pivot is the intention. I actually think Riot not picking Immortals at this stage, or Immortals not opting out, is probably favorable to both parties. It's a little clunky and awkward, but there are mechanisms with which Riot can kick teams out of the league, and Immortals has effectively fulfilled that mechanism. So in the world where Immortals pushes too hard and says like, you need to pick us. We need that. What is the estimate? 4 to 6 or 8 million, whatever it is. We need that. Buy us out. I mean, I'd be really worried to say that if I'm Immortals, because Riot might just turn around and say like, actually, we have picked you to be kicked out of the league. We're not buying you. We're not buying you out. We're just going to push you out. So it wouldn't shock me at all if we start seeing something like that be where they go. And I think the teams that are in that want it out are probably just waiting for their like Valorant adjacent payday of please leave the league so we can make this pivot and we'll pay you more now.
See more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, be a pleb and don't.